Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Kindy Kruller. I'm a senior program manager at the Illinois Green Alliance, leading the programs and partnerships of the Building Energy Hub. And we're excited to have you all here today. We're going to get started. Well, welcome again to the 2023 Illinois Commercial Stretch Code Workshop, hosted by the Building Energy Hub and the International Code Council. As I said, my name is Kindy Kruller, leading the partnerships and programs of the Building Energy Hub. But before we get started today, I'm going to provide a little background about the Stretch Code and the Building Energy Hub. On September 15th, 2021, Governor Pritzker signed a bill known as Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, or CEJA. One important part of that new law was the provision for the Illinois Capital Development Board to create a state stretch energy code. The new state stretch energy code provides mechanisms for jurisdictions throughout the state to raise the bar for energy efficiency and driving down future energy costs. The 2023 commercial and residential energy stretch code became available for municipal adoption on January 1 of this year. The city of Evanston became the first Illinois municipality to adopt the stretch code in February of 2025, which goes into effect in Evanston on October 1st of 2025. This webinar today will familiarize those in the building industry with the amendments to the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code, IECC, that comprise of the 2023 Illinois Commercial Stretch Energy Code. Today's course is eligible for AIA and ICC continuing education units, and all of our slides and resource links will be shared with the attendees after the webinar. Now let me share a little bit more about the hub. Next slide. The Building Energy Hub serves Illinois area stakeholders with critical training and resources, ensuring that the region can meet our aggressive climate action goals within the building sector while building an inclusive green economy. The hub collaborates with key partners to curate energy efficiency and financing best practices for building owners, operators, design professionals, and contractors, and serving as a one-stop shop focusing on technical and actionable resources. So if you haven't spent time on our website, please check it out. We'd love to have more people see all of the wonderful resources we've created and hear from you. We also do a monthly newsletter. We'll talk about that at the very end. Next slide. Today's session on understanding the implementation and compliance requirements of the Commercial Stretch Code is a perfect example of the type of education offerings you'll find at the Hub. We record and offer all the slide decks from our education programs, and we also have a variety, as I've said, resources and partner resources on our website. All right, let's meet our presenter today. Next slide. Today's presenter is Jerica Stacy. She's the Director of Technical Training at the International Code Council. Jerica, along with the team at ICC, has been a wonderful partner to the Building Energy Hub, and we're excited to have her today. If you did not have the chance to join our residential stretch code workshop on Monday, the recording will be online soon and along with the slide deck. But today we're going to focus on the commercial side. Jerica, take it away.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for that introduction, Kindy. Today we are going to be talking about the commercial stretch code. It is based on the 2024 IECC. Before we do that, though, just a reminder that this and all of the resources available on the Building Energy Hub are available because of some funding that our team received from the Department of Energy and through the Building Technologies Office. The Building Energy Hub is, I'm going to throw a couple links in the chat as we work through today's presentation. But the first is going to be the Building Energy Hub. And that is because you're going to be able to find a guide to these amendments on the Hub, as well as a really awesome checklist. So I know I'm sharing my slide, but I'm also just going to walk you through. If you go to that link there and you come down here to our Illinois Stretch Code Guides, This is where you're going to find a guide to the residential stretch code as well as the commercial stretch code that really is just highlighting those amendments, the ones that we're going to talk about today. But you're also going to find these really great compliance checklists that'll be really great resources as more folks adopt the stretch code and begin actually enforcing the stretch code. Today's presentation is based on the 2024 IECC. We're going to start by talking a little bit about the 2024 because I know for most folks that is brand new to us as well. So when we're talking about the residential stretch code, that's based on the 2021 IECC. And most of us have had some amount of time to get familiar with those requirements. The commercial stretch code is based on the 2024 IECC, and there are a lot of changes already to the base energy code. And so we unfortunately don't have enough time today to really dig into what those significant changes are. This is mostly just going to be the amendments to some of those changes as well as additional requirements for the stretch code. But we will talk about the intent of the 2024 and some of those major changes that kind of guided how we were able to incorporate some of these provisions into the energy code. Then we'll talk about significant changes to the administrative provisions and then significant changes to those energy efficiency provisions, probably why most of us are here today. Another link I'm going to go ahead and throw into the chat is a link to the stretch code itself to our read-only online version. I really like the way that this is set up because what you're going to see if you go to that link, if you're going to see red text, meaning that that is an Illinois specific change to the code. That's where you're going to find the actual amendments to the code. The blue text is going to be what is new to the base energy code. So this is a combined document. You have the commercial stretch code up front and then residential stretch code towards the back half of the book. But you'll see those new provisions in the 2024 indicated by the blue text, and then the actual amendments to the 2024, which comprise the stretch code in that red text. And then both myself and Kindy will share some resources at the end of the day for you. Kindy already introduced me. I'm Jerica Stacy. I'm the Director of Technical Training here at the Code Council. I really do focus on our energy, resilience, sustainability related projects, including training and publications. So I do keep a running list of resources on my desktop. So if you ever have a question, especially we're going to probably introduce a couple things today that you've maybe never heard of before. And if you're like, hey, I remember on this webinar, you mentioned total system performance ratio. Do you have a resource for that? Please email me and ask. I'm happy to share whatever I've been able to collect and then send you to other resources like the Building Energy Hub for additional resources. All right, so let's start just talking a little bit about the 2024 IECC and the Illinois Stretch Code. So Kindy already mentioned the current statewide energy code is the 2021 IECC with state-specific amendments. Those amendments are going to be available online. You can see them again with that read-only version of the 2021 for that statewide energy code, but I'll also link to you a website that's going to provide a snapshot of what those amendments are. And then of course we have the stretch energy code. This is based on the 2024 IECC with amendments. Those amendments are going to be the energy saving and readiness measures that were incorporated throughout the 2024 IECC development process. And in fact, they are the requirements that made it into the final draft of the 2024 IECC prior to the appeals process. So some of the amendments we see in the Illinois Stretch Code are provisions that the appeals were granted on, therefore they became appendices to the 2024 rather than in the body of the code. And what we see in Illinois is those amendments or those provisions in the body of the code as they were during that final draft. And we're not going to talk too much about the details of the 2024, but I do want to make a couple of notes about the intent section because I like to start all of my webinars really discussing the intent of the energy code. I think that grounds us and it helps us understand why the provisions are in the code the way they are and just what the code applies to. So what we see in the base energy code of the 2024 is a change to the scope and intent section. The change to the scope section is very minor. We just see some rewording. You can see here on the screen In 2021, we say this applies to commercial buildings and the building sites. In 2024, we're actually just pulling in the definition for commercial building into that provision. And that's, there's a lot of work done in the 2024 to remove duplicative language and to just kind of streamline, increase usability and that sort of thing. This is along that vein where we're kind of just pulling in the definition so that we're not being too wordy where we don't need to be. The real change comes to the intent section. So don't read what's on your screen here. I'm really just using this yellow text for demonstrative purposes. I'm showing you with the yellow highlight the portions of the intent sections between 21 and 24 that are the same. So not the differences, what is the same? Everything else that is not highlighted is going to be what's different between 21 and 24. So in the 21, our intent section is very simple. We regulate the design and construction of buildings over their useful life. We promote this concept of flexibility, and we do that in the 24 as well, where we have multiple compliance options for you to choose from. And then even within those compliance options, there's different paths you can take to meet the intent of the code. And then of course, our above code program and alternative design and materials sections that support the concept of flexibility. And then the final concept would be that all other life safety codes are going to take precedence over the energy code. That idea of flexibility and the other life safety codes taking precedence is what is the same in the 2024. There is a lot of new information in the intent section. The next couple of slides, I'm going to walk through just some of the ones that I like to pull out because they're important in my perspective, but of course you want to be familiar with the entire intent section. So the first item I want to hit on is that the 2024 is intended to provide minimum efficiency requirements for buildings that result in the maximum level of energy efficiency that's safe, technologically feasible, and life cycle cost effective. So there was a huge amount of work put into making sure that all new provisions in the 2024 are cost effective and that anything we require is going to be available on the market across the US. So we did not want to require an obscure equipment type that is really only, available in the Southwest or whatever the case may be. We want to make sure that market availability and cost effective was at the forefront for every change that occurred in the 2024. We also need to make sure that there's a zero energy building compliance pathway. So for those jurisdictions that want to get to zero energy, we have to include within the energy code an option for them to get there. And we do that through the zero energy appendix. And we had that in the 2021 as well. But we codified this language that says, yes, we have to have these options for jurisdictions that want to go above code minimum. And along that same line, we can also include additional energy efficiency and greenhouse gas reduction resources within the code or within the appendix, depending on how you read the intent section. But we, again, wanted to make sure that we were assisting jurisdictions in meeting all of their goals. And this is the first time we actually see mention of greenhouse gas reduction resources in the energy code at all. We want to make sure that there are those resources available for jurisdictions. And then finally, each subsequent edition has to provide increased energy savings over the prior edition. So what that really means is that throughout the development process, we're constantly doing analysis. Pacific Northwest National Laboratory does the analysis to make sure that the changes that are occurring are going to result in an energy code that is more efficient than the previous version. So we've actually been doing that with each code edition anyway. I have a little bit of data here for you. Every time we have a new model energy code, the Department of Energy through Pacific Northwest National Laboratory issues a determination. And that determination is just whether the current version of the energy code is more efficient than the previous version. When we're talking about residential energy efficiency, DOE looks at the IECC and they look very closely at the residential provisions and compare that to the previous code. On the commercial side, they typically look at ASHRAE standard 90.1. And this data is still very important to us that are using the IECC because it is a compliance path, and we typically assume that our compliance paths are going to get you relatively to the same end point as far as energy efficiency goes. So when DOE looked at ASHRAE Standard 90.1 2022, which is included in the 2024 IECC, they found about a 9 to 10% increase in site energy saving, or not increase. Increase in site energy savings, increase in source energy savings, and then a reduction in carbon emissions by about 9%, and energy cost savings of about 9%, which those energy cost savings are really important to us in just affordability and that sort of thing. I will link the website with all of this information, including these infographics, in the chat. But just to visually show you these improvements in energy efficiency, this is looking just at ASHRAE Standard 90.1 and those changes in efficiency over time. And you can see a fairly large jump in efficiency in the 2022, largely because of some additional energy efficiency measures, but also because they've just picked up. We have collectively picked up a lot of new provisions that improve the efficiency of our commercial buildings. We did get analysis on the 2021 IECC, but because that's not what the stretch code's based on, I'm not going to go into details on that. But I mentioned that we need to be doing analysis throughout the development process. So we do have some preliminary analysis on the commercial provisions of the IECC compared to the 2021 IECC. You can see over here, we're looking at about a 10% increase in savings, much like ASHRAE Standard 90.1 in site energy cost and emissions reductions. So very similar to what we see in 90.1. Now, all of these changes in efficiency are going to help with, Kindy already talked about, but the goals of the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, or CEJA. The 4 bullet points here are really the primary goals of CEJA. That we're going to incentivize renewable energy development, accelerate electric vehicle adoption, and expand charging station infrastructure, create statewide clean energy workforce training programs, and support communities that are facing those energy transitions. And a lot of the amendments that we find in the 2024 for the Illinois Stretch Code are going to support these main goals here. And the ultimate goal as it relates to our energy code is to achieve a site energy index of 0.39 when compared to the 2006 IECC or less by the end of 2031. So this initial Illinois stretch code is going to help achieve this first goal of a 0.6 site energy index, and then each iteration after this will improve that site energy index to reach that final goal. I do have a couple of resources related to CEJA and the goals there. So I will throw those in the chat as well for anybody that's interested. All right. And then I also mentioned that I would put the Building Energy Codes program link in the chat. All of these resources, for those that are catching the replay, or if you're like not keeping up with the chat, you don't want to keep up with the chat, they're all going to be at the end of the presentation as well. All right, so we're going to talk first about some of the amendments that are in chapters 1 through 3, or what we typically call the administration chapters, that comprise the Illinois Stretch Code. So these again are in amendments to the 2024 IECC. So chapter 1, this is going to be our chapter that establishes the limits of applicability of the code and describes how the code is to be applied and enforced. So this is that chapter that we're going to find that brand new intent section in. It's also going to give us the responsibilities of the code official and the rights and responsibilities of our design professionals, contractors, and property owners. So essentially everybody's roles and responsibilities are outlined in chapter 1. There's a couple amendments to make note of in the Illinois Stretch Code. The first is that compliance is going to be, the enforcement procedures are going to be determined by the authority having jurisdiction. So that local jurisdiction is going to have the responsibility of establishing enforcement procedures. And then we also are going to see an expansion of the compliance options. So we can either show compliance, demonstrate compliance through materials like computer software, worksheets, manuals, those kinds of things that we typically demonstrate compliance with, or we can have a professional architect or engineer seal on those construction documents, or we can also submit a ComCheck compliance report. So there's three options here that the code outlines that you can demonstrate compliance with. We would typically see a ComCheck report if you were going to use a component performance approach or total UA that is within the prescriptive compliance path for essentially calculating an allowance for your building thermal envelope. But this codifies that we can use ComCheck to demonstrate compliance. We're also going to get an outline of the appropriate above code programs. So we do know that typically in the base energy code, we allow the authority having jurisdiction to deem a program to be an above code program, and it would then comply with the energy code, as long as it also met some additional minimum standards. The Illinois Stretch Code says that for an above code program, we're either going to meet the program requirements of Passive House Institute US, or the requirements within Appendix CC. That is our zero energy commercial building provisions appendix that is essentially going to have you comply with the 2024 IECC and then use enough on-site or off-site renewable energy to get to zero. With all of our above code programs, we do still have to meet the mandatory requirements within the code. So those of you that are used to the 2021, actually, let's back up. Those of you that are used to the 2018 and haven't yet done a lot of work in the 2021, one of the major changes related to usability in the 2021 code is that we actually removed the mandatory designation from the code section titles, and instead we just created a list, or I guess a table is a better way to phrase that. We made a table of all those mandatory requirements that apply to our project, regardless of the compliance path that we're using. So now, as we look at the 2021 and we look at the 2024, we no longer see that mandatory designation, but we do have a table of mandatory requirements that we have to meet, and our above code programs are going to have to meet those same requirements. In Chapter 1, we're also going to see a couple of changes to the construction document requirements. So this is the provision that lists 18 different items that have to be included in our construction documents. It's going to be things like our U values, all of our mechanical system details, our lighting system details, air sealing, that sort of thing. We see a couple of new items in the 2024 IECC related to brand new concepts like thermal bridging or total system performance ratio, that sort of thing. In addition to that, what really impacts the Illinois Stretch Code is going to be electric infrastructure on our construction documents. So we do need to show conduit, pre-wiring, any interior exterior spaces that are designated for future electric equipment. We want all of this outlined in the construction documents. So this is kind of a precursor. What kind of electrification requirements are we going to see in the stretch code? All of those are going to have to be detailed in our construction documents. We're also going to pick up verification of our electric infrastructure during the electrical system inspection. So I didn't make a slide specific for that, but where now we have to show the electric infrastructure on our construction documents, we're also going to have to verify those in the field during that electrical system inspection. Chapter 2 is our definition chapter. This is going to essentially include all of the specific definitions for the terms throughout the 2024 IECC. Most of our defined terms are going to be italicized, and where they're not defined, where a term is not defined, we're going to rely on other I-code definitions. And this is really important, especially building mechanical systems where we're relying on definitions that are in the International Mechanical Code, or we're going to use common use definitions. I'm not going to go through all of the definitions that have been added to the 2024 or the stretch code, but I've kind of categorized them here just for you to be aware of. We're going to see new definitions in the 2024 for renewable energy procurement, thermal bridging, mechanical equipment definitions. So there's a really big effort both on the residential and the commercial site to define literally almost every component of a mechanical system so that we can effectively apply the code provisions to them. We're going to find total system performance ratio related terms, fan system terms as we continue to look at the fan energy index as our metric for fan systems. We're going to continue to refine some of those definitions. And then control systems for our mechanical and lighting components, we're going to find definitions for those as well. What's new to the stretch code that you're not going to find in the base energy code are our electric vehicle charging infrastructure terms. So we are going to talk about requirements for electric vehicle charging, and we'll see those terms then, but I want to make sure that you're aware that there's a lot of new definitions. When I teach a 2024 significant changes class specifically, I can go through 3 or 4 slides of just lists of terms that have changed. And I always say, if you're brand new to a code or you want to know exactly what's coming down the line within that particular code, start in the definition section, because you're going to pick up all these terms for these new concepts. And also, I like to kind of fine tune my own knowledge on how the terms are defined. There are no changes to chapter 3. So chapter 3 is our general requirements section. It's pretty much the catch-all for all of the provisions that don't necessarily fit somewhere else within the code. We did get that update to our climate zones in 2021. We don't see any changes in 2024 or in the Illinois stretch code to change any of those chapter 3 requirements. So our commercial energy efficiency requirements, this is chapter 4. It applies to new construction, and then wherever on the existing building side that you trigger these requirements, it's going to send you back to chapter 4. This is also where we're going to find additional energy efficiency requirements that they've really been expanded in 2024. So there are some changes or some amendments that Illinois made to that section. I'm going to kind of back up and talk about that section a little bit more holistically, just to make sure that we are understanding the concept behind it. But first, I'll let you know, we do have our typical compliance options. These are really well defined in the 2021, and that carries over. But I just really love the usability of now saying, okay, you have 2 options for compliance with the commercial provisions. You can either use the IECC or ASHRAE Standard 90.1. If you use the IECC, you can choose between prescriptive compliance or simulated building performance compliance. And if you use ASHRAE Standard 91.1, the stretch code is going to include some amendments to 90.1 as well, which is not something we always see when states amend their energy code. So it's really cool that it's included in the base document. So we'll start by talking about those changes that occur within the prescriptive compliance path, and then how those actually impact what we see in the other compliance paths as well. So chapter 4 is laid out like you see here on the screen. We have essentially a section for every major building system. So everything from our building thermal envelope to our mechanical systems, service water heating, electrical power and lighting systems, and then our additional energy efficiency section. You'll notice that in the 2024, we've added renewable and load management to this as well. Our simulated building performance, our commissioning section, and then this brand new C409, which is total system performance ratio. There are no amendments that Illinois made to section C409, so we're not going to talk about it today, but I just want to make sure that because the 2024 is going to be very new for most of us, that you're aware of the fact that there is this new section. It is a compliance option for prescriptive compliance for our building mechanical systems. So that's all I'll say on that, but just making sure that you folks are aware that that is a new requirement in 2024. So thinking specifically about our Illinois amendments, the first we're going to find is our fenestration orientation section. So this is I guess maybe not all of the items that we're talking about are amendments to the code. A lot of them are just new sections to the code, which again is Illinois amending the 2024, but not necessarily because there was already a section within the 2024 that we've just tweaked a little. This is new to the 2024 for Illinois as the stretch code. So essentially, this section is going to limit our east and west facing fenestration. We know that east and west facing windows can contribute to significant heat gains, and most of the time that's going to increase our cooling costs as well. So this section is intended to put a limit on the area for our west oriented and east oriented fenestration. The code gives us 2 options. The first option is looking at area only, and it limits both the west and east facing fenestration to 25% of the total area. So 25% for west oriented and 25% for east oriented. We've got that limit of about a quarter of our total fenestration area. The second option, it's also looking at area, but it brings in the solar heat gain coefficients as well as another element to figuring out your allowance for east and west facing fenestration. And then there are some exceptions to this section that are going to account for shading of our fenestration, and then, where the east and west oriented fenestration accounts for 20% or less of that gross wall area. We're also going to see kind of a whole slew of requirements related to demand response. The demand response is a concept. I like this little image here. It's kind of geared towards homeowners, but we're going to use our imagination and expand that to our commercial buildings as well. But the main concept is that a building owner or a homeowner, or perhaps it's a tenant in one of our multifamily buildings, they're going to participate in a demand response program. The utility company or whoever might be issuing a demand response signal is going to send out a signal when we actually need to decrease the energy use. And we're going to require for different building systems for our energy use to be decreased, either by lowering our set points or reducing our output, that sort of thing, for a period of time. Once that signal is ended, then we go back to our normal energy use. So we see this in our building mechanical sections, where we essentially are going to require that all electric heating and cooling systems have a control that allows for you to participate in the demand response program. There's no requirement to actually participate. This is just allowing you to if you choose to. And typically, you're going to be financially awarded if you do so. On the mechanical side, we're going to adjust the heating and cooling set points by 1 degree, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 4 degrees over the period of that demand response signal. And again, once it ends, we go back to our normal use. There are some exceptions. Those are going to include things like group H and I occupancies, but throughout this webinar, we're not going to discuss all of the very specific exceptions. So if you're kind of thinking, I don't work on projects that this seems like it would apply to, make sure you check out those exceptions. And that goes for all of our provisions. We're also going to find requirements for demand responsive water heating. This is going to apply to our electric storage water heaters that are between 40 and 120 gallons. And they're going to require an adjustment to the set points as well. Now, you're seeing on the screen here what I would consider, a water heater in a dwelling unit. However, we do know that as the capacity goes all the way up to 120 gallons, we are going to pick up a lot of commercial applications, as well as the potential for multiple 120 gallon water heaters to be combined to meet our water needs. Now, water heaters are going to play an important role in demand flexibility because they inherently store, they inherently provide thermal storage. So if we can kind of shift that energy use over a period of time, we're going to be able to meet those goals of our demand signal. And typically with no impact to the user either. But we also see our demand responsive lighting controls. So this is going to apply to group B, E, M, and S occupancies. And the requirement is that the interior general lighting in at least 75% of the interior floor area has demand response controls. This is another little graphic that kind of looks specifically at how we want the lighting to react when it receives this demand responsive control. Essentially, what we want to have happen is that we're going to control the output of that lighting to 80% over the period of that demand response signal, but no more than 15 minutes. And we're doing that through continuous dimming. So as soon as we receive that signal, we're continuously dimming for no more than 15 minutes until we get to 80% of the output. And then we can just kind of hold it there. Once that demand response signal is lifted, we're going to go back to our normal lighting settings. We also are going to see some amendments to our horticultural lighting section. So this is a section that is in the 2024 IECC, whereas most of the previous ones are not in the 2024 IECC. They're available as appendices. But this requirement is actually in the 2024 IECC. It's an improvement to the requirement in the 2021, which is where we first saw our lighting, our plant growth lighting requirements come into play in the model energy codes. So in grow lighting, we're looking at micromoles per joule, which is this kind of funky looking metric here. That's a measurement of lighting efficiency. It effectively shows us how effectively a grow light converts electrical energy into usable light for our plants. The 2024 is going to give us two different thresholds depending on what our growth facility looks like. If it's a greenhouse, and these have to be permanent greenhouses, so those that are constructed for more than 180 days, our threshold is going to be 1.7 micromoles per joule or better. For all other horticultural lighting, so this is going to be like our vertical farms and that sort of thing, we are going to have a threshold of 2.2 micromoles per joule. The higher micromole per joule indicates a more efficient light source. So we do have this amendment in the Illinois stretch code that improves the 2024 requirement of 1.9 to 2.2. So we are requiring some more efficient lighting in the 2024. The other amendment that we see in the Illinois stretch code is the exception for cannabis facilities that are subject to the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. Now, both with greenhouses and horticultural lighting, we are going to require lighting controls. When it comes to our greenhouses, we just want to make sure that there is a control that turns off the lighting when enough daylight is present. And then in our all other facilities, we essentially want you to have a programmed approach so that we're turning off the lighting at specific times throughout the day. We're also going to get requirements for EV infrastructure. So the Illinois stretch code is going to require that our parking facilities have some amount of electric vehicle power infrastructure. And that's going to be determined by table C405-14-1, which I'll show you in a couple slides here. That's going to detail our space types. So whether that's EV capable, EV ready, or EV installed based on our occupancy type. It's also going to be based on the number of automobile parking spaces for that building. And specifically, when we're talking about group R2 buildings, that's going to be based on the number of dwelling units or parking spaces, whichever is less. So this is one of those provisions that really supports some of CEJA's goals, specifically that goal that is to accelerate electric vehicle adoption and expand the charging station infrastructure. So this code provision is where we're going to pick up those new definitions that are related to electric vehicle. We're going to, and these also are going to support those requirements for the different space types. So we can either install well, not either, it's going to be dependent on what our occupancy type is, but there are different space types. EV capable, which is a parking spot that has the electrical infrastructure installed. EV ready, which is basically an add-on to that capable. It's got all the electrical infrastructure and it has an outlet or enclosure to connect to that electric vehicle supply equipment. And then an EVSE space is going to be everything fully installed there, ready to plug into your electric vehicle. So table C405-14-1 is going to tell us how many of these space types, whether that's EV installed, EV ready, or EV capable, that are required based on our occupancy type. The code is also going to allow us, if we install more EVSE spaces than is required, we can count those towards those ready and capable spaces. And if we install more EV ready spaces, we can count that towards our percentage of EV capable spaces. So essentially, this kind of gives us a tiered approach to our electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Now, you will notice that some of these occupancy types, 100% of their parking spaces are going to have to be one of these three. Group R2 is what I'm thinking of specifically, where 75% are capable, so they have the electric infrastructure, 5% are ready, and then 20% are going to be fully installed. We also have a requirement for electrical energy storage systems. This is one of the requirements that really allows the designer and the building owner to decide how to best meet this requirement by giving us two options. The ultimate goal is that all of our commercial projects will have electric energy storage systems in the future. However, this requirement allows us to either be ESS ready, which means that we have an area that's reserved for energy storage systems, essentially ready to install ESS somewhere down the line. Or we can just go ahead and meet the requirement by having an installed energy storage system. The code is going to outline what that actually looks like, but this is one of those requirements that's really going to also support the CJ goals of that kind of energy transition for our communities. This is going to help us, especially as in the 2024, we are going to require some amount of renewable energy for all buildings in climate zone 0 through 7. So this is kind of in support of that same concept. The other part of this requirement is really going to point us to the International Fire Code and NFPA 855 for those very specific location and minimum area requirements. So you'll want to pay very close attention to those referenced codes and standards as well. And the final one before we talk about additional energy efficiency credits is electric infrastructure. So this requirement is going to apply to our group R2 occupancies, so those occupancies that have dwelling units, and it's going to require electric infrastructure anywhere that you have fossil fuel equipment installed. So this is going to apply to our space heating equipment, surface water heating equipment, our cooking equipment, so ranges and ovens, and then our clothes drying equipment as well. Anytime we have a combustion system or combustion equipment for one of these 4 equipment types, we also have to have enough corresponding electric infrastructure so that these equipment types can be swapped out for electric in the future without the cost of retrofit. So that's really the important concept behind this, is that the next building owner, or even because we're talking about group R2 occupancies, the next occupants of that dwelling unit are able to swap out their equipment without the cost of retrofits. And this is also going to support CJ's goal of supporting communities that are facing that energy transition. All right. We're going to talk now about additional energy efficiency credits. There's really it's not minor, but there's really only one little amendment within this section, but I want to talk through the section so that we can kind of see how that amendment actually impacts us. This is a requirement for projects that are complying prescriptively with the code. So this section has a complete overhaul compared to 2021. If you're used to the 18 code, the 21 is going to look different, and this is going to look very different. So 21, we move towards this credit-based system where we have to earn a certain number of credits based on our occupancy type. And that same concept applies in 2024, but we really have expanded the number of credits that you have to achieve, as well as requiring renewable and load management credits as well. The stretch code amendment is going to be an adjustment factor for buildings without heat pumps. So that's the real difference between the 2024 and the Illinois stretch code, is this multiplier of the number of credits we have to achieve for buildings that do not have heat pumps. A reminder that our energy credits have to be over and above what you are already doing in your project to comply with the base requirements of the 2024 IECC is what the slide says, but what the Illinois stretch code is what we are requiring here today. There is no double dipping. So if you've already improved your fenestration because you're using some kind of total UA trade-off, you can't then get more credit for that improved fenestration, for example. So the 2024 And the Illinois Stretch Code includes 32 energy credit measures that we can choose from to achieve those additional efficiency requirements that we'll have for our building. The number of credits that you need is going to be based on your occupancy type and climate zone. And every measure is going to be worth a different amount of credits based on whether or not you're in a certain climate zone and what your occupancy type is. Each credit represents 0.1% of whole building site energy. And the goal is that each project improves their energy cost savings by about 7%. So that's why we see some differences in the number of credits that are required, because we're really trying to ultimately hit that 7% goal. In the 2024, we do have load management and renewable energy credits that are introduced. However, there is some carryover allowed between energy efficiency credits or base energy credits and those renewable and load management credits. That is another, it can be a complicated concept that we won't cover today, but just know that if you exceed your credits, you can use them to help reduce the number of credits you might need elsewhere. So what does this really look like? If we have a building that is over 2,000 square feet, our additional energy efficiency credits are going to apply. So we have two different sets of credits now. We have additional energy efficiency credits, which I basically just call base energy credits or just energy credits. These are the credits that really impact the building system. So improving the building thermal envelope or improving the efficiency of our mechanical system. Elements within the building that are typically not going to be, that are permanent, more permanent in nature, I guess is cutting to the chase. These are more permanent in nature. Then for our projects that are over 5,000 square feet, we're going to have a certain amount of additional energy efficiency credits and renewable and load management credits. So this is a new set of credits that we have to achieve if we have a project that's over 5,000 square feet. And those are going to be less permanent in nature. They're going to be more like adding additional renewable energy or managing loads and that sort of thing. This is an example of what our energy credit table looks like. So I already mentioned it's based on your occupancy type. It's also based on your climate zone. So for example, if we had an office building in climate zone 5A, we are going to have to achieve 71 additional efficiency credits. Now, the amendment to the stretch code tells us that if our project does not have a heat pump, we're going to have to actually multiply this number by 1.25. So in this case, same office building, climate zone 5A, occupancy type B, we would typically need 71 credits. Well, now we're multiplying that by 1.25, so we know we need 89 credits instead. And that is the amendment within this section for the Illinois Stretch Code, is that multiplier. Now, just to kind of finish out this discussion, the measure tables, which is what you're seeing on your screen now, are going to be based on occupancy type 2. So we talked about having a group B in climate zone 5A. Well, now we can actually have an idea of how those energy measure credits are going to apply to our climate zone. So if we improve our total UA by 15%, we're going to get 21 points. And you're going to mix and match until you hit that required number. So in our case, 89 points. You're going to mix and match until you get that. This is obviously very much a partial table, but this gives you a good idea of the number of credits based on climate zone and what you're actually doing to that building. Now, the other side of this, let's say we have a project that's over 5,000 square feet. We're going to also need renewable and load management credits. So we just talked about base energy credits. Now we need renewable and load management credits. If we're in climate zone 5A, we have our occupancy type B. We're going to need 38 credits. There is no multiplier to our renewable and load management credits. That is important to note. We do have the multiplier for our base energy credits, but not here for our renewable and load management. And then we're going to also see our measure tables like this based on our occupancy type. So again, to achieve the required number of renewable and load management credits, we're going to mix and match from a variety of renewable and load management strategies to get to those credits. I wanted to kind of do this a little more in depth than I typically would, because we're also going to see these energy credits show up in our other compliance paths as well. So when we're talking about complying with the code using section C407, this is our simulated building performance compliance option. This is going to consider almost all of the systems within our building: heating, cooling, service water heating, receptacle loads, process loads, that sort of thing. To comply with this compliance path, you're going to have to meet the requirements in table C40721, which is our mandatory requirement table, and meet a site energy use goal. So if we're looking just at that mandatory table, you're going to see that anything that was added to the Illinois stretch code is also going to be added here if it makes sense. So not everything, I shouldn't have worded it that way, but if it's deemed a mandatory requirement and it applies to all of our projects regardless of compliance path, you're going to find it in this table here. So you see that fenestration orientation provision that we talked about. What you're also going to see is if you kind of drill down into here, we talked about demand response in our service water heating. We talked about demand response in our lighting systems. You're also going to have those same requirements if you're using simulated building performance, because they are tucked up into these sections here. I also want to make sure that you see that our additional renewable and load management credit requirements are going to apply if we're using C407 as well. So those renewable and load management credits are going to be in this list of mandatory requirements. Now we are going to get a new calculation method for compliance using site energy use. So typically the IECC uses energy cost, but because we are trying to achieve those CEJA goals, we use site energy use in the Illinois stretch code. And there's a new way to determine what your site energy use has to be in relation to your standard reference design. So we get this new calculation method. This is our percentage of site energy use of our proposed design has to be less than or equal to the percent of the site energy use of our standard reference design. We're going to use this equation here. A couple things to know is that this 0.8 is essentially what was required in the 2021 code. So previously you had to have your energy cost had to be 80% of your standard reference design. So that's where we get that 0.8. And then our energy credits are going to show up in this calculation as well. So we're going to go back to those energy credit tables and plug it in. So I have a quick example. I know we're getting really close on time, but I want to make sure that just to kind of see how this works. So to rewind and bullet point this, we get a new calculation method and we're using site energy use in place of energy cost. And that site energy use has to be less than or equal to the PSEUC, which we calculate now. So if we go back to our office building example, we're in climate zone 5A. The building does not have a heat pump. So that's going to be important because remember, we have that multiplier if we don't have a heat pump. Looking just at our equation here, I'm going to actually just go, well, so what we're calculating, we need to know the number of energy credits that we need to achieve. So if we go back to our energy credit table, we know we're in climate zone 5A, occupancy type B, we need 71 credits, but we have that multiplier because we don't have a heat pump in our building, so we really need 89 energy credits. So we're going to plug in 89 into our equation here, do all the math to figure out that our percentage of site energy use has to be 73.6% or less of our standard reference design. So you really are using, again, those energy credits to calculate what our site energy use has to be for our projects if we're using total system performance. And then the last couple slides I have here are if you're using ASHRAE standard 90.1, the Illinois stretch code also provides you with some amendments to standard 90.1. The first is that you are going to have to meet the requirements of Appendix CI, or Total Building Performance Pathway, and you're going to have to meet the additional requirements in table C40122. This table, I pulled it straight out of the online version. It's going to pretty much hit all of the items that we've talked about today. So if you're complying with 90.1, you also have the horticultural lighting, you also have electric vehicle infrastructure, and so on. And then you have to comply with Appendix CI. And Appendix CI really just replaces energy cost with site energy throughout 90.1. So it details those those sections that you're going to have to replace the concept of energy cost with site energy instead, which we already see in the simulated building performance compliance pathway as well for the IECC. I'm going to turn it back over to Kindy. If you're when you get this handout, you'll have all of the resources available to you that I've thrown in the chat and that I've kind of mentioned as we've moved through this, as well as some other resources like significant changes to 90.1. There's a really cool little quick sheet that we have, and links to our 2024 IECC significant changes if you want to see how the base energy code has changed.
Thanks, Jerica. You make it all sound so easy.
Scratch through it, but I don't want to keep anybody even a minute over.
No, I think it's great. It's great. And it's good for our listeners today. And it's great for our future listeners who might have to check back in as their needs arise. So we just wanted to share a couple more resources from the hub. This recording will be available on our education page along with Jerica's slide deck. And then all the links will be hyperlinked within that slide deck. I just wanted to point out some of the resources, and Jerica already pointed to this on our website at the buildinghub.energy. We have our stretch code guides for both commercial, residential, the Illinois stretch code compliance checklist, and then we can't forget our great friends at CDEC, the Smart Energy Design Assistance Center based out of University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. They have a lot of wonderful resources as well. Next slide. We also don't want to leave behind our municipalities. There's some wonderful municipal resources that we've recently added to the hub website. We know that municipalities are looking for additional information and opportunities to learn more, grow their staff knowledge and capacity around these issues. And it's also just a great opportunity. And from a stretch code perspective, the state is having an open for stretch code adoption assistance. This is a grant up to $200,000 for municipalities throughout the state of Illinois. These grants will be offered every year for the next 5 years. So just a lot of great resources. Next slide. And speaking of funding, you can find some of those funding resources that I just mentioned for the state grants, along with some of the other opportunities. We know that this is a tricky moment. We try to keep this page as up to date as possible. And I can't go without saying we have a help desk, so you can either email, call, and they can help get you started if you have any questions about any of these resources. And this is how to stay engaged. Check out our website. You can scan the QR code. If you want to volunteer with us or have a great project that you want featured, we're also on LinkedIn. And as always, our newsletter is the best way to keep in touch. Jerica, thank you so much. And thanks to our behind the scenes team member, Rim Jim, for running the tech for us. We wish everyone a wonderful day. Happy Juneteenth. And we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Kim.
Bye.